The last two topics in Objective 3 address product and sales mix. So unfortunately, companies do not have unlimited resources, and so we have to deal with constraints. In this particular topic, we're going to talk about capacity constraints, and this is something that limits the production or sale of a product. And most of the time, this capacity constraint simply is in the manufacturing process. We do not have enough machine hours to manufacture more products, or we don't have enough man hours to manufacture more products. This is a good problem to have. That means we're very active in producing our product, and in the long term, as I mentioned earlier, we either need a new shift, new property, plant, and equipment, or more employees, and we have to figure out what is the best way to maximize our return on investment in the long term. But in the short term, what can we do to maximize our efficiency and our contribution margin? So we're going to consider producing and selling the parts that not only have the highest contribution margin, but the highest contribution margin per capacity constraint. So let's see how that works. For example, we go back to our standard tablets and our premium tablets. If we know the sales price and the variable cost, we can calculate the contribution margin for each tablet and the contribution margin ratio. So we know just on the basic contribution margin that our highest contribution margin is coming from our premium tablets. So if we had no capacity constraints and we could sell as many as we could make, we would want to focus on these premium tablets. But what if we do have a constraint? Which product would we emphasize the most? The one that has the highest contribution margin per the unit of constraint or per capacity constraint? In this particular situation, your book tells you that your capacity constraint is the number of machine hours that you have. And so it takes 7.5 hours to manufacture the standard tablet, 10 hours to manufacture the premium tablet. If we know from our prior calculation, let me back up again, contribution margin of 192 and 225 has simply been carried forward for your standard tablet and your premium tablet. So this is my contribution margin if we had no constraint. But since we do have a limitation of hours, the 192.50 contribution margin divided by my capacity constraint gives me contribution margin per machine hour. Machine hours are my capacity constraint. It's the same thing. $225 in contribution margin divided by 10 hours which is required by the premium tablets, gives me a $22.50 contribution margin per machine hour. Now, we can also say 1 divided by 7.5 is 0.133 hours per tablet, or 0.1 hour per tablet. And so either way, 192.50 times the 0.13 or 225 times 0.10 will work, but it is simply your contribution margin per whatever your capacity constraint happens to be. In this case, it's our machine hours. So now the table turns a little bit, and our contribution margin per capacity constraint is higher for the standard tablet than the premium. Why is that? Because it takes less machine hours to manufacture, and machine hours is where our limitation takes place. So if we could sell every standard tablet that we could manufacture, then and there were no other qualitative factors concerned, we would manufacture and sell only standard tablets in this particular situation. Okay, but we can't put on our blinders and ignore all of the other factors. Okay, so your book has gone one step further to show you that if you have 19,500 hours available, this is how many hours your machines can run. If you multiplied 19,500 hours times your contribution margin, notice this is per machine hour, it gives you contribution margin per capacity. Okay, and this is a little misleading because if you wanted to determine what your total contribution margin is, it would be your original contribution margin times the number of units that you have sold. But our contribution margin at capacity contribution margin per capacity would be 500,370, so that you can see that it is slightly higher for the standard tablet than it is the premium tablets because hours are our limitation. So, how do we maximize profitability when we have some constraints like limited machine hours? So, your book gives you an example here that says, what if instead of manufacturing every standard tablet using all of your 19,500 hours, instead of using all of them to manufacture standard tablets, what if the market could only handle, and let's see what they give you, what if the market could only handle 2,000 standard tablets? Okay, so if that's the case, our contribution margin per machine hour is still the same, but let's say I can only sell 2,000 tablets, not 2,400, but only 2,000. Well, they've estimated that it would take 15,000 hours to manufacture 2,000 tablets. Where did they come up with that? Let's back up and I can show you. If it takes 7.5 hours for the standard tablets, 7.5 hours for the 2,000 tablets that we're talking about in our new alternative, 2,000 times 7.5 gives you our 15,000 hours. So if the market could only handle 2,000 of our standard tablets, once again, then 2,000 tablets at 7.5 hours each uses up 15,000 of my 19,500 hours. So I would use my remaining hours, the remaining 4,500, which is simply 19,500 less 15. I would use my remaining 4,500 hours to manufacture as many premium tablets as I possibly could. And remember, my premium tablets take 10 hours each. So 4,500 divided by 10, I could manufacture 450 premium tablets. So once again, they've shown you that my maximum contribution margin per capacity is manufacturing 2,000 standard tablets and using the rest of my hours to manufacture the 450 premium tablets, to a total of $486,150 of contribution margin per capacity. Okay, so once again, it's a little misleading because if I truly wanted to calculate contribution margin, I would take 2,000 standard tablets, 450 premium tablets, and I would go back to my original contribution margin per tablet, 2,000 at 192.50, 450 at 225 would give me my total contribution margin based on, let's come back here, the fact that I'm selling 2,000 standard, 450 premium tablets to maximize 15,000 hours for these tablets, 4,500 hours for these tablets. So to maximize my 19,500 hours, this is the product mix that I would utilize. Now we can also take into consideration a sales mix for a merchandising company who is not manufacturing a product. So there are some constraints along with the merchandising industry, just like there are in the manufacturing industry. And the illustration that your book provides is, what if you only have a limited amount of display space in an airport bookstore? Okay, so if our contribution margin for hardcover books is $8.40 and my contribution margin for paperback is only $4.80, then this is where we want to focus our time. If we have unlimited book space, and if selling only hardcover books wouldn't impact my sales otherwise. Okay, but those qualitative factors always come into play. So if we obviously, based on our problem, we have a limited amount of display space, and we probably want to give our customers an option of hardcover and paperback books. But when we're trying to determine our best sales mix, what we're going to do is take our contribution margin, and in this case it's times the linear square foot, because the more display space I have, the more contribution margin I can generate. So it's simply 840 times 10, 480 times 20. And so in this case, if I look at contribution margin per my capacity constraint, the highest contribution margin per capacity constraint is my paperback books. So as long as I have a limited amount of space in those airport bookstores, sell as many paperback books as you can possibly sell using your linear space, and then fill the rest of your space with hardcover books. And so once again, we have to think about what this mix is going to do to my sales. We do have a constraint, and how many people in an airport are likely to buy a heavy hardcover book as compared to a paperback. But how many of our airport people are avid readers and they want that hardback book in their collection? So we have to take into consideration more than just contribution margin. But this, okay, the calculation that you see here, considering our constraint, is our beginning point to determine contribution margin, contribution margin per capacity constraint, and then we have a starting point with our quantitative numbers. Bring in your qualitative factors to finish off your decision in a way that will be most effective for your organization.